Hottie, I've got a 2019 prediction to make.
Oh, I love predictions.
I love making them. I predict this is going to be the year people stop thinking of CBD oil as being just this weak marijuana. I think this is the year that CBD is going to go mainstream. Further, I would say this is going to be the year CBD stops having any kind of stigma.
Yeah, I think the cycling world is definitely heading in that direction already, and understanding CBD is a big part of that.
Yeah, but we're not quite there yet. I don't think a lot of us still understand everything. I know I sure don't. There's sort of a vague understanding of what CBD oil is and what it's good for, as well as what it's not good for, and how much you have to take, or if it's going to have any effect at all.
Yeah, I do know, Fatty, that some of the governing bodies have been checking into CBD, and they've lowered their guard on this, and they're going to start allowing certain doses. But we want to fully explain CBD to folks. So we're actually going to bring Floyd himself onto the show to ask him some of the questions we have. Because while we're glad to have Floyd's of Leadville as the Leadville podcast presenting sponsor, we're no experts here, and we'd love to bring in our listeners' questions too.
Yeah, so listeners, do us a favor. Head on over to the Leadville100podcast.com. That's our home site. And give us your questions. Just post them on the comment section. Anything about CBD. If you've got a good question, we'll ask Floyd himself.
Yeah, a lot of folks don't realize how serious Floyd has become about CBD. He is a smart guy with this stuff.
He certainly is. And meanwhile, be sure to check out Floyd's of Leadville. Once again, he's our presenting sponsor at floydsofleadville.com, and use the code FATTY at checkout for a 15% discount on your first 2 orders.
And again, thanks, Floyd's of Leadville, for sponsoring our show.
3, 2,
1. Leadville, the podcast for the 100-mile mountain bike race, presented by Floyd's of Leadville. It is Season 2, Episode 4 of the show that breaks down, builds up, gets you ready, and freaks you out for the highest and hardest one-day mountain bike race in the country.
Hottie, we've got a couple of really great interviews for this episode. Most people don't think a lot about it, but every year there's got to be someone in the Leadville 100 who is the last person to finish. It's not all about the winners. And that person is known as the last ass over the pass. It's an actual official title with a trophy and everything. He is the last person, or she, I should be clear on that, the last person to finish under the 12-hour mark, and they still get the belt buckle and the jacket. That person, you can assume, has always got a story to tell. And Hottie, in 2018, the last ass over the pass was Mark Bates. In this episode, we're going to hear his story.
And then to help listeners avoid being the 2019 last ass over the pass, I've got an interview with Bob Forster. He's a physical therapist and a coach, and he's going to help us find more horsepower in our engines.
Hottie, I know that this time of year, the race season, including the Leadville 100, seems kind of far away. This is the time of year when we sort of put in base miles, maybe work on getting our weight down. I'm speaking of me, of course. But my wife, Lisa, is doing something entirely different. She is really working smart during this winter to get ready for the race season. And I'm kind of trying to take her lead.
What's she doing?
Well, she's experimenting. See, she's doing the Lead Woman this year, and she's really focusing on her running so she can be ready for the Leadville 100 run, which happens the week after the Leadville 100 mountain bike race. Her biggest concern, of course, is her feet, and she's begun buying and trying all kinds of socks and shoes and all kinds of athlete tape to learn what the right combo is for her to be able to do big distances in training and racing without having blisters and sore feet be a huge problem for her. So she's doing all this experimenting right now while there's still time, so that by the time she gets to spring and summer, she'll be down to small refinements instead of these big ones, and she'll be able to focus on her training and racing part of the equation instead of having to worry about things like tape and shoes and socks and all of that.
I think I see where you're going here. You're obviously not doing the lead man yourself, but
No.
you're still using this time of year to experiment?
Yeah, I kind of am. I'm a huge believer in how critical the nutrition component is for the Leadville 100. And this is the time of year when I can experiment with different things, food and different drinks and supplements without any real kind of penalty. I'm not going to get sick in a race because I'm not racing right now. There's a lot out there for me to try and learn from. And I'm going to thefeed.com to try all these different things out. I'm seeing what works, I'm seeing what doesn't, and I'm learning now while the race season's still pretty far away.
Yeah, February is a great time to try new things, and our sponsor, The Feed, is exactly the right place to go experiment. Head on over, chat online with their experts. I love this idea. They have experts right there. They're going to help you choose the food you might want to try. Tell them that the Leadville podcast sent you and see what they recommend for you and the goals you have set. It's worth noting, our podcast listeners can get a great price on a pack curated for Leadville racers. Go to that site, thefeed.com/Leadville for our Leadville pack, and be sure to use the code Leadville15 for a 15% discount on either of those boxes.
Yeah, and as always, you can use that Leadville 15 code for buying any amount of Morton at a 15% discount. And that is one experiment I can say has been very successful. I will definitely be using that product again during all my races this year.
Yeah, me too. All my good, hard, long events, Morton in the bottle. Again, it's thefeed.com/Leadville, and use the Leadville 15 code at checkout. Fatty, what kind of testing do you do and how often?
Well, earlier this week, I did, in fact, do the ramp test on Trainer Road, and I do it a couple of times a year. To my shame, the ramp test told me that this time my FTP is about 20 watts lower than it was this time last year. So I have some work to do.
Yeah, I've done some of those FTP tests too, prescribed by Trainer Road. And it's great for people who have access to Trainer Road to do that stuff and to follow their programs. And if they have a Wahoo kicker to go along and implement some of those programs. But not all of us are equipped as such. So we wanted to talk about another scientific approach to finding out just how fit you are and what you need to do. I got with my good friend, Bob Forster. He's the founder of Forster Physical Therapy, where he has been repairing athletes for more than 30 years, myself included. He also owns and runs Phase 4 Scientific Health and Performance Center. He has worked with Olympians Jackie Joyner-Kersee, Florence Flojo Joyner, Allison Felix, great Olympian, tennis greats Pete Sampras and Maria Sharapova, Laker legend Kobe Bryant, and one hell of a cyclist, the great Michael Houghton, a.k.a. Hottie. That would be me, of course.
You were with some real legends there.
I know, right there, Sampras, Sharapova, Kobe, Hottie. I'm right there on his wall, I swear to you.
Just rolls right off the tongue.
Doesn't it? Yeah, it does. And that's what Bob says, too. Hey, good to have you back, Hottie. How you doing? In this interview, Fatty, we're going to learn how to find out how big of an engine you have and how to find more horsepower in it. And as a bonus, especially for you, Fatty, Bob and I talk about a second test that pinpoints how many calories you burn at rest. Okay? You're going to love it's especially for you, in fact. How much am I burning?
Not as many as I want.
How much are you burning when you're doing nothing during the holidays except gorging yourself? You're going to find that out. I caught up with Bob Forster at his offices in Santa Monica, California. I always like to say about Bob Forster, you fix them and you make them faster. So let's talk, Bob, about getting faster. And faster, as you've told me before, starts with testing, figuring out where the athlete is. You like VO2 max. What is VO2 max? What does that stand for?
It's a ventilatory quotient of how much oxygen your body can absorb and utilize. So in other words, analogy is if you didn't know how big a car engine was, but you can measure how much gas it's taking in and using, then you can, by inference, figure out how big the engine is. So that's what we do. We want to figure out how well trained you are, condition you're in, so that you can, how much oxygen you can use Again, think about that as fuel to make your motor run. One misnomer is that it's not always the VO2 max. We don't, especially in endurance sports, we don't care so much about the max you can do. We care more about how you're getting the job done. In other words, for a race like Leadville, we have to race at a certain pace to make sure that you are using a favorable blend of fats and carbohydrates to get through the race. So just to step back for a second on the exercise physiology primer is that the fat utilization energy system called the aerobic system is using fat, which is really advantageous because we all have enough fat to get through this race if we've trained in a way to learn how to tap into it. So we want to figure out at what heart rate you're changing in your intensity in your riding, what heart rate and what intensity you change from burning fat to burning a fat and carbohydrate mixture, and then again what heart rate you're going pure carbohydrate. So as you go harder and harder, your mixture goes from pure fats to a blend of fats and carbs, and if you sprint, you're using all your carbs only. The problem with using your carbs is a limited supply in your body, where fat is not a limited supply. Even the thinnest racers at Leadville have plenty of fat to do that course 2 times over if they've trained in such a way to tap into the fat, and then they stay at a pace that is more fat dominant. So say a 60-40 split between fats and carbs, you can, if you're well trained, you can go all day at that. So speed in an endurance race, especially an ultra distance race, really comes down to how efficiently you're burning fat. And can you burn fat at a greater rate, therefore sparing your carbohydrates so they last till the end of the day. And the other big benefit is that when you're burning more fat and less carbohydrate, you're producing less lactic acid. So lactic acid is a byproduct of carbohydrate metabolism, anaerobic metabolism without oxygen. And we don't want to use a lot of that system because you're going to go through your carbs, and more importantly, you're going to be fatigued more than you're, say, a teammate who's better or a competitor who's better trained.
Yeah, you're obviously going to use some carbs. It's unavoidable. You're going to climb a hill. You're going to be going up Columbine. You're going to burn some carbs. But the point is, and the point with the test is, let's identify what kind of fat burner you are right now, and let's focus in on that. So how does the test work? What does the athlete go through?
So we ask you to be well recovered for the test, and if you're you have to do it specific to the exercise modality, meaning if you're a cyclist, we're going to do a cycling test. If you're a runner, we're going to do a running test. If you're a triathlete, we have to do both because you're going to be much more efficient on one modality, i.e. bike or run, than the other. So then you come in, you're well rested by taking a day off of your training. You follow a protocol of what to eat, when to eat it, and then the test is a ramped up, graded intensity test where we're increasing the intensity every 4 minutes and watching your heart rate and watching your gas expiration. So we know when you start to burn more carbohydrates because the VO2 mask is collecting the gas that you're taking in and putting out. And so we can see where that point is, that your inflection point where, oh, you're fat burning. Oh, now you're burning some carbs. We keep going harder and harder. Now you're burning all carbs. This is how to create the zones, your heart rate specific training zones, so you can develop a better fat burning system. So it's not that people pass or fail the test. It's that you come in and see where you're at. And that gives you a starting point to make sure all your workouts are 100% productive and that you're not putting in empty mileage. You're training in the heart rate zones to develop a better fat burning system. Once we've developed that, then we will train your anaerobic system with intervals and your anaerobic system for the short, hard climbs. But most of all, to be clear, anything lasting more than 90 minutes or 2 hours, you've got to be a better butter burner, a better fat burner.
What's the difference between a VO2 max test and a blood lactate test?
Well, both tests can be used to determine when this transition occurs from fat burning to carbohydrate burning. And in the VO2 test, we're calculating or identifying that inflection point by the ratio of carbon dioxide and oxygen that you're using and putting out in the mask. Now, the blood lactate gets a little bit closer to the working cell in that instead of looking at your contents of your expired gases, we're looking exactly when does the lactate start to show up in greater proportion in your blood, meaning your muscle cell is now switched from aerobic metabolism, where there was only a little bit of carbohydrate being burned and a little bit of lactate, until we go harder and harder and find out that heart rate where you start to flood your bloodstream, and therefore your muscle cells have been flooded with lactic acid, which of course is something that's associated with fatigue. So anyway, using either one to find out your zones is important. The VO2 test gives us more information because it also tells us once we test you and then we train you to burn more fat and then we test you right before the race, we can tell you what heart rate to stay at to make sure you're at that 60-40 split, 60% fats, 40% carbs, and that's a good chance you're going to get through that day and close to your potential as an endurance athlete. So they're both used to develop heart rate training zones and then heart rate racing zones. So to tell you what to race at. And people forget that last step, to go into the race knowing exactly where you're at right now. If you peg this heart rate, you should be at a favorable fat to carb ratio.
Why can't I just do a field test? Go on my bike, ride up my local favorite road here. We all love Mandeville Canyon, and get my numbers that way.
Well, a field test would actually be you going long enough to find out what pace you can hold for 60 or 90 minutes. And then a coach might from there make an inference that, okay, this is your anaerobic threshold because you can hold it for about 90 minutes, 60 to 90 minutes. And then we'll use that. So it's kind of a guess. It's also very, it works well for coaches and pro athletes who are riding every day without anything else but focusing on their riding. I'm a little skeptical that if I'm going to test you, if I'm going to try to do a field test, I'm going to do it on 2 or 3 Thursday mornings. And what's going on in this athlete's life? Did they sleep the night before? Did they travel, just get off a jet? Did they, are they having problems at work, stress at home? All these factors can affect that field test. So it's not as accurate, and it's to set zones. We really don't know what's going on in your body. We're trying to make an inference from what we know about exercise physiology, i.e. that you can hold a certain pace. But if you have the wrong pace, then the test is wrong. If you go out too hard and you find out you're fading, you're not keeping your power wattage at 60 minutes, but you say you pegged a heart rate of 150, whatever you chose with your coach. But if you're wrong, then the day's shot. You're not going to get any information. In other words, towards the end of that test, you're fading. Oh, well, that wasn't the right heart rate. Let's try next week at 145. And it's just too many variables when the test is inexpensive. A VO2 test, is a little bit over $200. And for that much money, you're getting a lot of information that you can use with your coach or, use the Phase 4 coaches to set up your zones and set up your training plan.
Now, once I do the test, what do I get in the end?
What you'll get is heart rate training zones. First, you'll get a diagnosis of your current fitness. We're going to say, look, you're really strong down here in this heart rate zone. When you get into this zone, which could be, say, rolling hills, you're not as efficient. And then when you get to climbing, you're just, 100% anaerobic, so you're using all your carbs. So it's diagnosing for us where you're at now. But more importantly, unless someone came to us late before a race and we had to do a catch-up, more importantly, it's the beginning point of each year's training. This is where I'm at. And what do I need to do in the next 2 or 3 months? And, with a periodization training plan, what are you going to achieve in certain periods of time? And now we have a heart rate to say, okay, let's burn in this heart rate, this fat burning heart rate. And let's tell your body you're going to make energy using fat and get rid of its old ways of using carbohydrate. And you're going to then, therefore, satisfy your, some people call it off-season or preseason, early season training. Mm-hmm. That's the first order of business. Lay down your aerobic base. Mm-hmm. And you might know that we've proven this across all sports. Bobby Kersey, the track coach that I work with, has got over 60 Olympic medalists. I watched him do this now for almost 40 years, where he has sprinters, making sure they have an aerobic base with a 4 or 5 mile run. And the first time this happened, I was a young therapist, and FloJo was out on a 5 mile run. Of course, she became a double gold medalist and a world record holder in 100 and a 200, and won a bunch of gold medals. But when she's out in a 5 mile run, I'm like, Coach, her race is going to last 9 seconds. Why is she running 5 miles? And back then, almost 40 years ago, the exercise science wasn't available. But Bobby Kersey knew that if they didn't have a big aerobic base, first of all, they couldn't even get through the training sessions he created for them to be able to be in peak condition. But he also realizes even in 200 meters or 100 meters, if his athlete's using more fats than the athlete in the next lane, his athlete's going to build up less lactic acid by 80 meters and going to slow down slower than the other athletes because they're all slowing down after 80 meters. Our girl can hold it. We see this with Allison Felix, our current gold medalist and GOAT, greatest of all time, as she has 9 Olympic medals now. And even a 200-meter race, you see it looks like she's pulling away from everyone, but she's not. She's actually slowing down. they're slowing down more than she's slowing down. And why is that? I believe it's Bobby Kersey's success is in that all his anaerobic sprint athletes have a monster aerobic base as well. And especially his athletes go through multiple heats to get to the finals. They'll do multiple events at the Olympics, the World Championships. Jackie Joyner would do 7 events in heptathlon over 2 days, and then she would rest a few days and come back and do the open hurdles or the open long jump. And to have that kind of recovery, you've got to be a fat burner. If you're blowing through all your carbs in 2 days of heptathlon, you're not coming back 48 hours later and then setting a world record. So it's worked for him. It made me then look at the science, and over the last 40 years, the scientific community has caught up to Bobby Kersey's success, really, in showing us that this aerobic base is critical. So now for people like Maria Sharapova, Pete Sampras, even in tennis, we're getting a bigger aerobic base. They got to play for 4 hours, even though it's 12-second anaerobic bouts of activity in a tennis match. If they have to have enough stamina and fat-burning ability to go 4-hour Grand Slam final in the blistering heat, they better be a butter burner or they're going to crash in those last sets.
Yeah, and I think every Leadville racer worth of salt knows you're going to have to be able to burn some fat throughout this race. And the place you start again is VO2 max to get an idea where you are and how you're progressing. Can I get usable power numbers from a VO2 max test?
Yes, that's a great point, Michael. So we will give you results both in heart rate and power. They both are not perfect, meaning the heart rate is just an indicator. It's telling us, because we've studied you, we know at what heart rate, what system you're working. It's not a great algorithm to use for everyone because, first of all, Leadville racers are probably not in the middle of the bell curve as far as typical human physiology. So it's more important to get your profile, and in doing so, we're seeing that now you have a heart rate zone that you can use. During the race, there's something called cardiac drift. Your heart rate, even at the same work level and the same energy system that you're using, the heart rate's going to drift up because we get dehydrated. So we teach you to use heart rate up to a certain point, and then start to, we give you a zone that you can go above 10 beats above that and still be in that working zone, that aerobic zone. And it will give it to you in power as well. So we'll tell you if you're using a power meter. They both have their issues. They don't follow. Neither of those are exact following of what's going on inside your body, heart rate or power, but they're pretty darn good and only indicator we have of what's going on in your body.
Now, tell me about VO2 max. How well does it play once I get to altitude? What's the translation there when I'm looking at my numbers?
Great point. For altitude, we're just going to give you a factor. If you and we do this a lot because we have a lot of athletes in Denver that we go out and test, and that's the Mile High City. They also come here and test at sea level in Santa Monica. So there's a factor that we use and say, okay, if your number is such and such at sea level, you can add 5 or 8 beats, whatever it is, a certain percentage of your zones. You can add when you get to altitude and realize you're still in this aerobic zone. It's just a higher heart rate because there's less air in less oxygen in the air, so your heart's beating, faster at altitude. So anyway, all this is science-based factors that we can give you from sea level to altitude. Or if, say, you're someone who's tested on the bike, but you're going to do some running, we can give you a close approximation of what your heart rate on the run should be.
Now, another test you like to perform here is resting metabolic rate. Tell me what is RMR? What's this test about? What's it good for? How's it good for a Leadville athlete?
The resting metabolic rate test stands for, it indicates how many calories you're burning a minute at rest. So this answers the age-old question, do I have a fast metabolism or a slow metabolism? The answer to that question lies both in genetics, both nature and nurture, how you've trained your fitness and how you train your body. So it really should be the starting point because this answers the question, why can my girlfriend eat a pint of Haagen-Dazs every night and not gain weight? And I look at carbs and gain weight. She has a faster metabolism. And the resting metabolic rate is measuring that, resting metabolic rate of calorie burn. So now we know we have a number for what your body needs all day long just to keep itself alive. And then we add in your workouts and your lifestyle. If you're a letter carrier versus a desk jockey, there's not going to be many calories during the day, but we're going to add it up. But we want to know what your base is. And that it's really the starting point for any weight loss program or weight gain in that finding out what is your requirements just to run your body. Now we're going to add in your workouts. Now from the VO2 test, we know how many calories you're burning. If I prescribe a 2-hour workout at a heart rate of 176, the test tells me how many calories you're burning a minute at 176. So now when I'm working with an athlete who wants to lose weight, we know on the day you're doing a 3-hour ride, how many calories to add above your basic metabolic rate. You're also a desk worker, so there's not a lot of work going out there. So as opposed to another athlete who's maybe a letter carrier or some other job on his feet, he's got more lifestyle calories he's burning. So you got to calculate all those in, and then tell an athlete to create a small deficit, and they will lose weight. But the key to weight loss is the resting metabolic rate. And can you increase your resting metabolic rate? Yes. If you feed and create a metabolism that's very healthy, it'll burn more calories all day long. So when we make you fitter, especially an aerobic fitness, a fat-burning metabolism, you're burning more calories all day, and they're fat calories. This leads to a leaner athlete. And then specifically, we can tell you, like at this point, we're going to create a small calorie deficit. What we see is athletes who come in eating less and less, training harder and harder, so they crater their metabolism. So their resting metabolic rate goes down. They've actually depressed it. Very hard to lose weight when you don't have a rip-roaring metabolism. So a lot of our weight loss skills come from because we work with fighters, MMA, mixed martial artist fighters, and wrestlers who have to make weight, also jockeys, who have to make a certain weight class. So we've really gotten good at getting people down, reduce their body fat, not losing muscle, and increase. And the way we do that is by increasing their metabolic rate, but feeding their metabolism. And overtraining is a big problem. Overtraining will crater your metabolism, slows down your metabolism. We want to keep it roaring. So we have a lot of recovery, a lot of eating more. Athletes come in and we're oftentimes adding 30% more calories to their diet, and they lose weight. Because they had left, they'd eaten so little that they put their metabolism into a stall, and it's not burning calories all day, which is accounts for a big amount of calories you burn.
So it sounds like in a perfect world, you do both tests. You do VO2 max, you do RMR, you start your planning.
Exactly. And these are not expensive tests. You can get both those tests for probably around $300. You should do it in the beginning of the season. You could do it when we get done with your base training and switch to your intervals and climbing. And it should be right before the race so that we can give you a heart rate to race at. Mm-hmm. So, I think these are the best spent dollars for coaching because they're real numbers, they're objective, and it's real science. This isn't phase 4, philosophy. This is science that's been established all over the world.
Well, Bob, thanks again for the time so much, and hopefully our athletes can put some of this to good use.
Thank you very much, Michael. It's always a pleasure.
Fatty, I've done the VO2 test twice with Bob, and once I did the blood lactate test we talked about. I like the VO2 better because it can show you how much fuel you need for your workouts and races.
Oh, the VO test is so painful.
It is hard. You know what? It's a workout in itself for that, and it should feel like that because it's essentially a ramped up time trial where they're gauging as you're moving through heavier, harder work to see what you're doing, how much power you have, what your heart rate is, and what kind of fuel you're burning at each step along the way. So it really gives you a lot of great information. Again,
I need to do that.
I think you probably should find out a little bit about your engine and about your output. Again, that was Bob Forster, founder of Forster Physical Therapy and Phase 4 Scientific Health and Performance Center. If you want to go faster, just check out phase-iv, that's 4 in Roman numerals, .net. In a future show, we're going to get with Bob again and talk about how to prep your body for the rigors of the Leadville Trail 100 course.
Hadi, I want to talk for a minute about a part of the Leadville 100 everyone seems to ignore, and it's been driving me a little bit crazy lately. There are a few places it seems to me most of us lose time, and I've been wondering if we have to lose as much of it as we do.
Sounds like you have a secret to the Leadville 100. Where is this place?
All right, well, it's a bunch of places. It's all the places you have to walk, where you wind up, let me phrase it as a question. Where do you wind up walking in the Leadville 100?
Top of Columbine.
For sure.
I think Yes, every time I've raced there, the top of Columbine, maybe once I had a chance to clean it, but there was too much traffic. Clavicle Hill, maybe I've cleaned it once. That's out there in the pipeline section, kind of in between the pipeline and the single track. Of course, power line going back home. I mean, I don't even bother. It's just a no-brainer. Walk that.
Yep. And then there's a couple more up toward the top part of Powerline too, or at least I do.
Yeah, I try to clean those sections, but certainly you might find yourself off the bike there. So I would say those are the areas where I'm on foot.
Yep. And then, there are a couple more that you don't even think about, but there's that after the inbound Carter aid station, about a mile later, there is a sharp left turn and a little grunt, and you see a lot of people walking that too, and I'm about 50-50 for cleaning that. And then there is the first 100 feet or so of Boulevard where you can clean that most days when you're, just riding it plain. But when you're exhausted and you've got 100 miles in your legs, I've walked that once or twice too. So, I mean, there are a lot of places where in the Leadville 100 you walk. There's at least 5 or 6 for most normal people. And it's more than you think. And every time you walk, you have to spend time getting off the bike, getting into motion, that moment of inertia, I think it's called, where you are going from standing still to pushing your bike, and you're going slow. And then there's getting back on your bike, getting your leg back over it. And then there's the energy you're wasting by putting it, getting a restart, getting in motion again.
So are you saying you can skip any of these walking sections?
Well, I think probably only the very top pros skip all of them. But there have been times when I haven't had to get off for any of the upper section of Powerline. You were talking that you've done that as well. Or the grunt after Carter. Or the steep first 100 feet or so of the Boulevard. And the times that I have cleaned all of those have one thing in common.
What would that be?
I rode with a 2x drivetrain with a super low climbing gear. And I will say my fastest year ever, the year I got 812, was on a Cannondale FSI with a 2x10 drivetrain. I think a really important part of why I was fast that year was because I really didn't have to get off very often at all.
Yeah, and I'm 5 for 5 at Leadville with 2x, but the question is, why doesn't everyone ride 2x?
I think it's because there's a general impression that front derailleurs suck. I've lost more time to drop chains than I like to think about. And I think that's also why Shimano's Di2 drivetrain is so killer. On that FSI that I did so great on, it wasn't just a 2x10, it was a 2x10 with XTR Di2. I had it set up so I only had one shifter, and Shimano took care of making the shifts on both derailleurs. It was insane how perfect it was, too. It would overshift automatically, then drop back and trim to where the driveline needs to be.
Yeah, no one does a front derailleur like Shimano.
No one.
No one does it. They have invested in this idea. They believe in this idea. They pursue it all the time. Yeah, they have 1x offerings, but for 2x, for front derailleur systems, Shimano just can't be beat. So, for you, are you going back to 2x with XTDI2 this year?
I am not 100% sure. I want to try out the XTR 12-speed. The range on that is supposed to be just insane. And seeing the math is one thing, actually feeling it under my feet, then that'll be another. Maybe I'll be able to clean everything on it if I'm ever the fittest I've ever been by this August. I am saying that if you are looking for an advantage in this race and you're not considering a front derailleur because you've had bad experiences with front derailleurs in the past, maybe think about a better front derailleur. Honestly, I've never been faster or cleaned more steep climbs than I have with a 2x10 Di2 drivetrain.
Whichever way you go, I think we can agree Shimano is the obvious choice for your Leadville setup. Go to bike.shimano.com for more. We will also have a link at leadville100podcast.com.
So, Hadi, what do you do the moment after you finish the Leadville 100?
I abandon my bike. I get as far as I can from it. I wouldn't care if someone stole it. Actually, I try to find my housemates, my friends, and catch up with them on their day as we eat snacks and, under the big tent there on
Yeah.
6th and Harrison.
I love just laying on the lawn and having nothing to do and knowing that it's like, I've done my task for the day. I'm just going to relax. And then after, a little bit of exactly what you're describing, talking to friends and family about the day and hearing their stories, I love to go clean up and then head back to the bleachers at the finish line and just sit there and sip a Coke and try to eat something while I watch other racers finish. It is just super inspirational.
Yeah, even at the houses where I've stayed, blocks from the start line, you could hear that Leadville announcer well into the afternoon, early evening, calling
6
out the
p.m.,
names.
6:30.
Yeah, right, calling out the names of those last finishers.
Yeah, and of course, there's always someone who crosses within a minute of that 12-hour belt buckle cutoff. And I've always wanted to find out what their story is, what it was like to be staring at your computer and wondering, are you going to make it?
And that's exactly what we're going to find out right now. Mark Bates is a regular guy, a 50-something college professor who is nuts about bikes and wanted to see if he could compete and complete the race across the sky.
It is a great story, and one I think that just about any listener can relate to and learn something from. Mark Bates, welcome to the Leadville podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
First of all, tell us a little bit about, who you are. What kind of athlete are you?
I don't even know if I'd consider myself an athlete. I'm crazy about bicycles. I love riding them. I love racing them. I'm not the fastest guy in the world. I've only been doing it for about 8 years, and I'm 54. I'll be 55 in April.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, you are the typical Leadville racer. Middle-aged guy who loves bikes, has a day job, but you have done a lot of races. You've done the Shenandoah Mountain 100. How many times?
I finished it 4 times. I've DNF'd it twice. I did the Wilderness 101 twice. They're pretty technical in some sections, much more technical than the Leadville course is. But of course, you don't have the altitude.
Well, yeah, the truth be told, Mark, is if Leadville didn't have altitude, I know, Fatty knows, anybody who's raced that race knows, it wouldn't be that much of a race. I mean, the distance is something, but it's the altitude that is going to nail every entrant, whether it be Alban Licata going for the record or Mark Bates just trying to finish the darn thing. So it is the altitude. But I'm curious about Leadville this past summer. Now, give us some of your Leadville history. You've done the race once prior to the summer of 2018?
Yes, I did. I did my first Leadville was 2017. Fortunately for me, I did the camp before the first race. The camp was fantastic. I mean, I can't imagine seeing the course for the first time in the race. So I did the 2017.
What was your finish time?
I had about 8 minutes to spare.
Wow.
And I was about 215 pounds, I believe.
What was your weight in 2018?
175.
Okay, so you did some serious work.
I dropped a lot of weight. My fascination with the race goes back to when the movie came out, the Race Across the Sky movie came out. I had never heard of Leadville. Seeing that race and seeing that there was quite a few older, masters type riders in that, it inspired me. And I was probably 230 in weight the first time I saw that movie. So, and that was when the movie was new. So it was about 2009, 2010. So it's inspired me, and I've been, going into the lottery every year until I finally got in 2017. It just became like a matter of course. Every year, enter the lottery. Every year, sorry, try again. So when I got it in 2017, it was a huge surprise. Angie and I were sitting in there in our normal spot watching TV or something, and I got the email, and I said, I'm in the Leadville race. And she said, "You're lying." And I said, "No, I wouldn't lie about such a thing. I'm in it."
Take us from the starting line up through, say, through the pipeline aid station. How did that part of the race go for you?
Well, it started great. I mean, I felt as good as you can feel at 6:30 in the morning when it's 35 or 36 degrees.
It's cold.
Yeah, I felt good. I felt rested. I felt ready to go. Found a nice slot. I wasn't with a bunch of crazy people. I felt pretty good. I felt really good going up Keevens. In fact, I PR'd the climb up to Carter Aid Station. Even though I had some stuff going on with my drivetrain, I couldn't figure it out. I kept looking down, thinking maybe I'd picked up a twig or something in my cassette. I wasn't sure what it was. I love bombing down that paved descent, but on one of the little bumps, my chain popped off. So here I am thinking, oh my God, I'm going to get creamed from behind. So I got off to the right as fast as I could. And it was pretty obvious to me that my rear through axle was loose. Tightened that up, got the chain back on, and the drivetrain performed perfectly the rest of the day.
I'm glad that didn't unthread entirely.
No joke. So I got it tightened up. The bike was working fine. I just put it out of my mind. I was eating and drinking on that little paved part before we turned back onto the dirt. I had a really nice climb up over Sugarloaf and even down Powerline. It was just, everything was just going perfect. I felt like I was on the pace I wanted to be. I rode through the pipeline aid station. The single track out went fine. The first year I got behind a tandem, which was kind of a bummer. But this time it looked like I had just lucked into the perfect slot where I wasn't holding anybody up and no one was holding me up. I love that single track going out. It's just fun.
Yeah, that's one of the best parts. And Hadi, are you thinking at this point, this sounds like the story of a guy who's about to have a really bad day?
Not to me, no. Yeah. Well, Mark, what was your goal? What kind of time were you trying to set here?
10:30 was doable for me, maybe even 10. I felt really good all the way up to the base of Columbine.
And then
shortly up the climb, where you have that first tight right-hander once you go into the trees, it was like flicking a switch. I went from feeling like I was on top of the world to actually looking forward to the climb to there's something going on in my stomach. And it is not good. It came on very sudden, and I kept thinking, maybe it's a bubble. Maybe it's going to go away. I mean, it's not fun to talk about, but I think we've all dealt with gastric distress.
We've all been
in a race before, but this was the worst I had ever felt.
I will say that I have scrambled down off the side of Columbine out of sight for that reason. So I
thought about it.
Yeah. It's not a pleasant thing to have to consider, no question.
Yeah. I thought about it, but it's, when something like that happens, you're totally not focused on climbing anymore.
No.
Even though you're wanting to keep moving. It felt like it took me a week to get, up to the goat trail. And then the walk part was excruciating. And not only was I above tree line, but I had other things occupying my mind. And in my mind, I was thinking there's a portalet on the top of Columbine. Of course there isn't.
I've had that thought before as well, and have had that disappointment as well. So yeah. Word to the wise, no porta potty at Columbine.
Right. So by this time, my fluids were pretty much depleted when I got up to the top of Columbine. I stopped. I refilled my Camelback, refilled my bottle, mixed my drink in my bottle, and got going, thinking I'll go down the mountain and I'll stop at Twin Lakes, and maybe there I can, take care of business. But by the time I got about halfway down the descent, I started feeling better, and that's kind of a theme when the climbing's over. It's like the stomach felt like it was doing better. In fact, I got down to the bottom and I said, I'm doing better. I'm not going to stop because I've got plenty of fluids. I don't feel like I need to stop. So I just kept going. And then about part of the way up that paved climb, it occurred to me that it's getting pretty damn warm. and I realized, I've still got my arm warmers, my leg warmers, my wind vest, all that stuff on. So I stopped up at the top before it goes back to dirt. And there was a nice group of ladies there. They were waiting on their rider to come. And they helped me, pull the leg warmers off over my shoes and all this stuff. They had some nice cold water there, and they let me have some of that. And I got going again. I was feeling kind of okay. Somewhere maybe like a mile before I got back before I got back to
The single track,
which is a climb now. The cramping and the bloating and that whole terrible feeling was back stronger than before. And that's about the worst place to have that hit you, because it's kind of a job getting up that single track heading back. I struggled to get up that. And then, of course, there's that kicker of a climb that I've heard people call it different names. I walked up that thing, and the ride back to Pipeline aid station was just, I felt like I couldn't go any slower. And I was amazed that exactly. And, I said, all I got to do is get there. If I can get to Pipeline aid, I know there's a portalette there. And I thought magically I could spend a minute or two in the portalette and everything would be better.
Mark, at this point, do you know that your goal is gone by this point?
Yeah, I knew my goal was gone. In fact, the demons were poking at me saying, give it up. There's no way on earth you're going to drag yourself feeling like this up power line. So I was starting to, talk myself out of going on past Pipeline.
Were you continuing to eat and drink through all of this discomfort?
I was.
Wow.
I was.
Huh.
I was.
Well, that's good. I mean, that shows that you were still determined, at least. I mean, you were still trying to keep the idea of finishing in mind, even when you were in real distress. Yeah. I mean, talk about discomfort, but you kept fueling and tried to push forward.
Right.
Even up the Pipeline.
Right.
How long were you at the porta potty?
I think I was stopped for at least 20 minutes total, and probably half that time I was in the porta potty.
That's going to, I mean, your body's going to just stiffen up. It is going to be hard to ride again.
It was terrible.
And did you feel better coming out?
No.
I mean,
no.
So it wasn't that you really needed to poop.
It was not a productive use of my time sitting in the portalette. We'll just put it that way.
Oh, no.
It was more bloat than anything. And every time I would go to stand up, I mean, you know what it's like when you're riding, especially if you're riding with a Camelback. So you're in a portalette, Camelback comes off, jersey comes off, bits come down.
Yeah, it's a process.
And every time I would stand up, I did that probably 2 or 3 times. Every time I would stand up, my stomach would cramp again, and I'd sit back down. And it became apparent to me really quick that these cramps weren't going to go away. It wasn't going to be a magic in and out of the portalette and come out feeling like Superman. So I got redressed.
I have taken the liberty of looking up your stats from the race. You got into the pipeline aid station with 8 hours and 11 minutes into the race. You did not leave until 8 hours and 49 minutes into the race.
Well, there you go. So it was longer than I remembered.
You were there for a full half hour.
Yeah, because I had in my mind I had quit, but it wasn't until after I went and sat down. There was a tent in the neutral aid area, and I went and sat there, and I saw guys going by. They all looked like they were working hard, like no one looked like they were feeling great. And I saw one of my friends from the stage race go by, and I just got to thinking, how does this work? You know, if you officially pull the plug, and they take your bracelet off, do you have to sit there and wait? And how does your bike get back? How do you get back? And then I just said, bullshit. I looked at my watch and I said, I have over 3 hours. You know, I said, and no one here is trying to make me stop. So I shoved some cookies in my face and grabbed my bottle, threw my Camelback back on, and just got on the bike. And of course, you know what comes next is that paved section with the wind. And I was in no shape to jump in a pace line, or I was just doing all I could to get going again. So that was every time the wind kicked up on that paved part, it just felt like it was pushing me back. It was excruciating. And then you do a little bit of climbing and you're at Powerline.
Oh boy, Powerline. Mark, let me ask you this. Were you doing this ride unsupported?
Yeah, just me. Just me and neutral aid.
Wow.
There was no one smacking you and saying, no, you go finish this thing. The only thing that was keeping you on your bike was yourself.
Right.
And a fair amount of stubbornness, it sounds like.
When I was sitting there at Pipeline, I know this may sound corny, but I was hearing Ken saying, dig deep. You know, you can do more than you think you can do. You know the spiel. And
oh yeah.
It really got me to get back on the bike and go. It worked.
Now you're facing that wall, Powerline.
Yes.
What are your thoughts at the bottom of that nice hill?
I just told myself, you know, on the pushy part, I just told myself, take a step, take another step, take a step, take another step. I couldn't ride anything except the parts where it was going down. Everything. All those false summits. You know, I knew there was like 11 false summits, but when you're not feeling that great and your mind's playing tricks on you, you kind of start thinking after 7 or 8 of them that the next one is it. I miscounted. This is it. It's not it. It's not it at all.
You got well acquainted with your demons then.
Yes. I was so happy to get to the top of that thing and get to the point where you have some downhill, and even the rough part, the cobbly part, felt great because gravity was my friend all of a sudden. I guess I was feeling a bit better because I don't remember the paved climb being that bad. It was just slow, you know, because I was pretty depleted. It was slow, but it was steady. And when I got up to the top of at Carter's, there was no one there trying to stop me. That was my fear, is that I was going to hit the cutoff. There was no one there trying to stop me. They were like, go, you can do it. And the descent down Keevens was like heaven. It felt like a reward after the whole day. And by that time, I was starting to feel pretty good because my average speed on the Garmin, even with the 40 minutes that I sat idle, my average speed was starting to clock back up. And every time I would hit a corner where there was a marshal, they were giving me time till 12 hours. They were saying, it's going to be close, but you can do it.
I'm sure they were giving you outrageous levels of encouragement.
It's amazing how it feels like everyone there, whether they're a volunteer or someone standing on the side of the road, it's amazing how much energy they can give you because you feel that they want you to succeed. They don't know me from the man on the moon.
Oh, yeah.
But, they're giving me information. They're giving me encouragement. One of the highlights of my time remaining in there was I got over that rocky part that gets you up to the boulevard, and it just felt like such a grind. I was starting to feel like maybe it's going to slip away from me. It's really going to be close. And there's a little rise in the in about halfway through the boulevard, and I saw Brian and the crew from Cycles of Life were standing there on the side of the boulevard cheering people on. I'd seen him bike stand at the alternative stop there at the base of Columbine, with helping someone that was having a mechanical, no doubt. And you'd think that these guys would be tired of bicycles by the end of that long day of helping people, but they took the time to go and park by the boulevard and cheer people on that were coming in at the very end of the race. I just thought that was amazing. And he ran out, he sort of boosted me over that little rise in the road, and he said, "You can make it, but you got a hammer." And I was thinking, I don't have any hammer left in these legs, but I felt like a little bit more encouragement was nice. And a couple minutes after that, I looked down at my Garmin and I knew the average speed that I needed to make it, and it flipped past that. And I said, if I can just keep on going, I'm going to make it. It may be after the gun, but I've got some buffer with my chip time. And there was, people along 6th Street that were all, giving me times, and they sort of relay raced me up that little rise, before it drops down. It was like, this guy pushed me a little bit, this guy pushed me a little, that guy pushed me a little bit, and then I was home free after that. And I didn't even hear the gun. Of course, the gun had already gone off.
But could you see the clock? Well, at some point, the clock comes into view, right? Can you see the clock as you're coming?
I wasn't looking at the clock. I was looking at my Garmin, and my Garmin had not gone past 12 yet when I was on the red carpet. So right when I finished the red carpet, I punched the button on my Garmin. It still hadn't gone past 12, so I knew that I made it. And then Angie comes running up, and last ass over the pass was the last thing on my mind at that moment. But she was screaming at me. She said, "I think you're the last ass. I think you're the last ass." And I said, "What the hell is she talking about?"
11:59 and 57 seconds. You had a 3-second buffer.
And yeah, well,
that you could have played with there.
3 more seconds in the portalet, and we're not having this conversation.
Mark, did you by chance look behind you to see who was coming up behind you?
I didn't. I did not. My neck doesn't turn that well. I've had some surgeries on it, but it wasn't even in my mind. But Angie told me, she said, there was nobody behind you. And I said, really? Not even like a minute behind? Because there could have been someone and that was in the white that, had a bigger chip time buffer. And she said, no. She said, there was no one on the entirety of 6th Street behind you. And I said, oh, well, maybe I was the last one.
Mark, did you realize, looking at your stats here, that you actually had a negative split for your second half of the race?
No.
Even with that 40 minutes that you spent in pipeline.
I didn't realize that.
Your turnaround at Columbine was at 6 hours at 1 minute 57 seconds. So basically 6:02, which means you had a good second half. You might have felt terrible, but you actually improved by a lot, especially if you compress out that long stay at pipeline.
Wow.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Well, I'll never pull myself out of a race again, unless I'm, within reason.
Yeah, as long as you can stay in.
Yeah.
That's incredible advice from someone who felt like, in your own mind, you were out.
Yeah.
And then you fixed whatever was in your head, and you didn't fix your body, but you pushed it and you did it. That's amazing.
Mark, did you figure out what went wrong? Did you eat something? Do you know?
I think looking back at it, I think I overate the night before. I ate similar to what I ate before all the stages, but those start so much later in the day,
I've done that. Yeah. I went out for a big, thick pasta night once. It was before a road race, not before Leadville. And although I didn't have a similar episode as you, I know what you went through. I mean, it was just too much food. It didn't have, it was an early start the next day, and I felt awful. I was off the back before I knew it.
Right. Well, I won't do that again.
Speaking of again, what's your plan for 2019?
Well, I'm not greedy. I'm realistic. I've got that 10:30 time stuck in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
If I could do 10 and a half, I'll be pumped.
Well, Mark, I know that if you are anything like me, you probably spent a fair amount of time after the race kicking yourself and figuring out, well, if only I. But the fact is, you had every reason in the world to quit, and you didn't, and you finished under the cutoff. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, this is a real life success story. I think it is awesome.
Thanks.
And I am stoked to see you finish with that 10.5 in 2019.
I'm going to do my best to make it happen.
Gosh, 3 seconds, Fatty. That is something.
Yeah. And there is a lot to learn from Mark for any racer who is having a bad day. I can't believe that after a 40-minute stop, he got back on his bike and he finished the race. The hardest part of it, too. That last 25 miles is brutal no matter what. But after your legs have chilled out for 40 minutes, wow.
And folks, during the show, Fatty was quick with the math there. He looked up Mark's times, and what do you know? I mean, Mark didn't know a negative split for that second half, despite the time he lost at Pipeline. Mark really showed it's not over till it's over.
So, Hadi, before we close the show, I want to plug our good friends at Banjo Brothers, but this time I'm not really plugging one of their products, but instead a really great blog series they've been doing over on their site.
You've got to be talking about their 5 Things series.
Yeah, every week they've been posting this 5-question interview, same 5 questions, with sometimes famous, sometimes not so famous, but still really interesting cyclists, asking them what they're riding, what they're reading, what they're cooking and eating. And I love their last question, what is stuck in your craw? It's a pretty awesome way to get to know a little bit about the cycling culture all around us.
We all want to know what's stuck in our craw, don't we? I've got a lot there. Check that series out at banjobrothers.com/blogs/news.
Yeah, and if you look back several pages, I think back in October, you'll actually find me there.
You? Well, that's
I
great.
believe it.
Bonus. And after reading some of these 5 Things posts, you find yourself moved to make a purchase, and we hope you will, you can get a 15% discount off your order by going to banjobrothers.com/fatty-favorites. Banjo Brothers is tough, practical, and affordable. They're Minneapolis-based, in business since 2003, and just good guys. To get 15% off your order, go to banjobrothers.com/fatty-favorites.
Hadi, that's it for this episode of the Leadville podcast presented by Floyd's of Leadville. If you like our little show, give us a 5-star rating and review over at Apple Podcasts or wherever you like to listen to your podcast. We're not super picky about that. It'll help others who've caught the endurance cycling bug find us. Meanwhile, if you've got ideas or you've got questions for us, head over to Leadville100podcast.com, look up a comment section for one of the posts, one of the episodes, and just leave a comment, get in touch.
Also, do what I do. Follow Fatty on Twitter at FatCyclist. And find me at Michael Houghton. Not a lot there, but once in a while I'll tweet something out. Or find us on Facebook, where we both are active in the Leadville 100 Mountain Bike Participants Group. Friend us, and you know what? We'll friend you back.
Oh, yeah, we're very friendly. Good luck in your training. Thanks for listening, and we will see you at the start line.